Thank you for coming to the CMU International Film Festival live discussion event for the film The Rest. My name is Marina Cavalcanti. I'm the logistics coordinator at the festival, and I'm also a student at CMU, and I will help facilitate today's discussion. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. Today's event is being recorded, and by joining us, you are agreeing to having your participation recorded, as we will have this video posted on our website for future reference. You can choose to have your video, your camera off if you wish. To make sure that this event functions smoothly, all your microphones are muted once you join, and will be muted throughout the discussion. If you'd like to speak, we ask that you use the raise hand function on the bottom of the screen. You can find this by going to the participants tab at the bottom, and then there's a button to say raise hand. At this time, we will be calling your name and then asking you to unmute yourself. You can also write comments using the chat function located at the bottom of the chat. If you wish to do so, we will have the discussion will be pretty, fluid. We ask that you, ask questions, participate, and so you'll be able to do so either by the chat or by or verbally. And now, I think that's it. I would like to introduce you now to our moderator, Will Zavala. He's a filmmaker and film instructor at the University of Pittsburgh. He's also the director of the Documentary Salon, a monthly film society that he founded in 2006. And so, I will pass things off to Will. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. Thanks, first of all, to Yolanda Leon for bringing this film. It was quite a coup to bring it to North America, where I believe it's not been shown publicly before. And and I'm sure you've all seen it. So this will be a chance to tell us what you thought of it, and also maybe get a little perspective from our guests here. Here's what we're going to do. Lou, who it's at least on my grid is located directly below me. Lou Picard and I did a short interview with Ai Weiwei this morning, and we recorded it, and I edited it slightly. And so we're going to start with that. After that, you can either submit questions, like Marina said, via chat. You don't really have to have a question specifically. You could, if you have a comment that you'd like to share with us about the film, that would be great too. And hopefully we can have a lively discussion, as they say. So I'm going to play video. It's 17 minutes long through Zoom. Now, sometimes this does not play well. In other words, you don't get great performance. If that's the case for you at home, then you have an alternate way to look at the video, which is, and if you open up your chat, it says alternate playback for interview video. Don't leave the Zoom session. Just click on that and open up another window for YouTube. So if that's the case, let's leave about 18 minutes, and then, which means we're going to come back and talk a little further after that. Let me start with introducing the other panelists. First of all, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Aizenman, Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at Jewish Family and Community Services, where we help refugees newly arriving through the United States government refugee program through their first years and beyond in the U.S. We also have programs for vulnerable immigrants of any status. We help them in lots of ways, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Noor.
Hello, everyone. This is Noorulhaq Fazly. I work for JFCS as an employment specialist. I help refugee immigrants to find job in Pittsburgh. And I came with my family in America in 2016 from Afghanistan.
Thanks. And Lou? Oh, you're muted.
My name is Lou Picard. I teach at the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, specializing in Africa and the Middle East. interested in issues of human security and particularly interested in the issue of immigration, both North America and as well as in Europe. And thank you for inviting me.
Great. Okay, let's watch the video. Like I said, I'm going to share my screen, and if you get good results, then stick with us. If it's not playing well, just go over and watch it on YouTube.
Hello, Will. How are you?
Hello, Weiwei. I'll start. One of the recurring thoughts that I had as I was watching the film is how demanding the refugees seem. In other words, they would show up at the doorsteps of the Europe.
Hi, Will. We have no audio. I think we were getting it from your sound system.
Is
you
it bad?
Yeah, but I think you have to share. I'm sorry. You have to share your computer sound when you share your screen. There's an option, just share computer sound.
I'll try again. Sorry. Share sound.
Yeah.
Hello, Will. How are you?
Hello, Weiwei. I'll start. One of the recurring thoughts that I had as I was watching the film is how demanding the refugees seemed. In other words, they would show up at the doorsteps of these European countries and then expect services. And I was thinking, do the European countries really owe them anything? And even when they are resettled, then they are still like unsatisfied. And my thought is like, for goodness sakes, they're lucky to be alive. And so so I have other thoughts too that maybe reflect better on me than that one, but maybe I'll stop there and you can comment on that.
I think basically, if I have to use one word about Europeans' response to refugees, I would say shameful. Shameful. As we all know, the whole Europe, or basically the world, is really went through a dramatic political and change in past century. The European nations also fight with each other, and it's just it's not too long ago. But today, and they all have been refugees in one time or another. So and also some have been treated more kindly, and some has been treated extremely harsh, most like the Jewish community has been, devastating. But today, if we look at the new refugee situation, the Europe totally accepted maybe under 2 million refugees from a Syria war or Afghanistan, Iraq, all those combined. But then over 90% of the refugees are settled in their neighbor states, which only have like 2% of the global, global economy, So the most rich nations like US and Europe doesn't really accept that many refugees. And so even the one already landed in Europe, still in unacceptable conditions, such in Germany and many other places. Of course, they're grateful, or they're still alive, and they have a safe place. But they have been giving very little amount of support, like in Germany, in Berlin, the refugee may receive like 650 euros per month, which is ridiculous, and they couldn't find a job, and they cannot integrate with the new environment. So that that has been 4 or 5 years past when they decide to accept this 1.2 million people. But I think it seems nothing really happened. And, that is the general condition.
I wonder if I could jump in. One of the things that I was and am interested in is the issue of the broker, the people who charge large amounts of money to these people to put them in leaky little boats and send them off towards Italy. Did you run into that? Did you see that, or because I don't think it comes out in the film?
You mean when you talk about broker, you talk about the smuggler?
The smugglers, yeah, exactly. I guess broker is perhaps
first time I hear the words broker. It's,
yeah, I understand.
Of course, there's a smuggler. Every step a refugee can make, it requires there's money involvement. I think in our film Human Flow, we have you watched the Human Flow?
No, I haven't.
How about you?
Yes,
You did.
I did.
So I suggest you watching Human Flow, because this is like a sister movie, but in much grand scale. Mm-hmm. So in there's a lady who is calling me. She is from Iran, and she is devastated, because every step, if you waiting for the smuggler, you have to pay, and thousands of dollars, even for a child. So, but if you don't, they also manage. I think everybody paid. Yeah. Whoever come to Europe paid, and I think at least like a few $1,000s. This is very normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's right.
Well, I would tell you, I was in a very difficult situation in China. If somebody can pay, at that time, if somebody can, I don't care, smuggling or whatever, provide me out, I would pay. Mm-hmm. I would pay whatever I have to get out of there.
Another impression I got of the film is that at first I was impressed that an artist with you're a famous artist basically, and yet this is an interesting move for you to hand over the soapbox or the stage to other people. And I got the impression through most of the film that you were not making a statement of any type, and you were just letting them speak. But then that changed for me as we got to the end of the film, because I realized that this is quite a condemnation of Europe and its response to the refugees. I think part of that is in the refugees that you selected to represent. For instance, those that were resettled, I believe, in Germany, but chose to go back to Iraq. And of course, you could have chosen another family that had a more successful resettlement.
No, I don't see anybody had a successful experience. This is just, Germany have a clear deal with Afghanistan government. I also interviewed the ambassador of Afghanistan, ambassador to Germany from Afghanistan. So it's a clear policy. They think Afghanistan is a safe nation and they will send back the refugees, which is not true. It's not a safe nation. And we all know what happened in Afghanistan. I think Germany are very hypocritical to wave the flags to say we welcome you, but at the same time, they are really not doing so.
In the film, part of the impression is this attempt by the Germans, in particular the Scandinavians, the Swedes, to integrate people into their society. Do you have views on the appropriateness of that, given that they're refugees and not voluntary migrants?
I think first those countries from a language point of view, it's very hard to really integrate. They all need the laborers. Germany has 2 million people, labor gap. They need to fill it up, and the Syrian refugees probably is the highest, educated group they can get. A refugee I interviewed in my whole trip, the first one still living in my flat. He till today, and he couldn't find a location. He's an engineer. He has 7 languages. He can speak 7 languages. It's amazing person and very outspoken. But I just, I couldn't get rid of him. He stays in my place. I feel bad for him, but I said maybe you should move out. That's your choice to be part of a society. But at the same time, I cannot push him. So I understand his difficulty. $650 not going to for him to survive. And Germany, streets is dirty. The trees has nobody to take care of. Nobody cut it. You don't have to pay high amount for refugees. The excuse is they cannot give a lower amount, so there will be unfair treatment for their own laborers or stuff. But same times, how can you pay someone 30 euro an hour to work? 30 euro a day, it would be great for them. So, this is a problem with globalization. You cannot even use cheaper laborers. You only can explore the cheaper laborers in China or in India, to make cars and to make all the kind of equipment. But when they come to your place, nothing you can do about it. So it's really tragic.
The film, it brought to mind the idea that we maybe think of refugees or people in an unfortunate situation as less than, as human beings. And one of the impressions I got was that you were impressing upon us the idea that we have not just human beings with basic needs, where a country like Germany can say, well, we've taken care of them, but actually reminding us that they are that they have families and desires just like we do. And for me, that came into play when the family in Sweden was reunited, and they brought their cat. And a pet, of course, is a non-essential part of a family, but of course, it's that kind of thing is an essential, or it's an important part of lives of Americans and Europeans, and then people from refugees. It should be no different.
I think refugees are human, just like you and me, and they have emotions. They have their own dreams. They definitely associate themselves with the goodwill towards others, and they have been treated so badly, and to be give a name as a refugee, and just like if you give a name as terrorist, it's so strange, to not recognize those humanity in each individual, and they need to help. They need help.
Will you continue to pursue the issue of refugees, movement of people, or will you continue with the genre that you're working in now? Film?
Well, I'm an artist working with no plan, but in my hands there's another film about the Rohingya refugees. We already made for months. It's already be done. I sent it to Cannes, film festival. Normally, I always send my film to festivals till it been refused. Most films, almost all of them been refused somehow. So, because all those festivals have a deep market in China, they cannot avoid, they cannot have the risk to film my films. Yeah. So the Rohingya refugees are from Myanmar, and they settled in Bangladesh. It's such a tragic. It's biggest refugee camp, almost reaches 1 million. And then recently caught a big fire in their in their camps. And those are really beautiful people. We made a film, and it's going to, I think, very soon Ken will announce if they accept it or not. If they don't, we just put online. Like my other films, we did Coronation about the Wuhan pandemic lockdown. It's on Vimeo. And we did a Hong Kong struggle, which is also on Vimeo, called Cockroach. So, what can we do? We are just a filmmaker, and we try to make the best out of our knowledge or our ability. But, basically, we don't have a platform.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering what it's like for you to work in documentaries. It seems like quite a different means of expression from the other art that you produced.
Well, film has its own nature. I have to, if I write a poetry, it's very different from I write a novel or I write a manual. It's very different. So I was in the film school 1979, with those filmmakers, Zhang Yimou, Chen Kaige, we are same year of students, but never really want to make a film because China's censorship. And I just want to be an artist, so I don't have to go through, my art with this kind of bureaucrats or propagandist, censorship. So, but till very late, I started to make a documentary because I do have the ability to put online so people can watch it. But the problem is that not so many people even pay attention to films anymore. Coronation is the first film about this pandemic originated, rooted in Wuhan, and we have a beautiful film about it, but very few people watch it. Every newspaper talked about it, and still, and there's not much audience.
So a few things that we could talk about. One of the things I found interesting is his answer to my question about the selection of refugees that were in his film. As a filmmaker, I just assume that he's making shooting decisions and editing decisions, and he was trying to make a point in emphasizing the bad experiences of refugees being resettled, but he disagreed with that. We can never, of course, represent everyone's experience, but I thought we'd start with you, Noor, and maybe you could just spend a few minutes and tell us about your journey, why you left Afghanistan, what happened after that. It could be useful to hear that.
Thank you so much. First of all, when I watched the video, it's really reminds me the situation that why people decide to leave their country, and how miserable is that to be in that situation. It's very heartbroken and really made me sad because of to see people how they're looking for a shelter but they are being denied. And from experience in Afghanistan, people came in a point that decide between bad and worse. Some they know they are going to take a very risky journey to leave their country, either to Europe or anywhere, but they think that's the best way for their family and their future and their kids, that they can take this risky route somewhere to be out of the country. And when the situation like is really worse, people are being killed, they don't have any hope for the future. It was really a common phrase in Afghanistan that when people left their home in the morning, they say goodbye to their families because there was no hope and there is no guarantee of whether or not they come back in the evening. So one person, a neighbor, came back, another one did not. So there was so many suicide, bombing, explosion, so many bad things happened that people did not return in the evening. So that really created a big chaos and fear among the people, and they had to decide to leave their home, their loved ones, and to go somewhere to survive. And that's also when it was in my situation, personally, to relate to this situation really is that I really did not plan to leave my country. I have my mom, my sister. I had to be with them at this time. But because when I saw that I can't live there, so my life was in danger. My kids' life was in danger. There was so many kidnapping, so many things happening around me. And I asked my mom, if you allow me, I'm gonna just at least go somewhere that your grandson be safe. I know it's a very hard decision. At the first, she said, no, you should stay with me. And the next day she came, my mom, and said, yeah, you have my permission. You should go. At least I shouldn't be worried about you and my grandson. There are other kids, my kids here in Afghanistan. They are enough that I'm worried, but I don't want to be worried about you at least. So it was very hard for her to let me be out of country and take her grandsons from her eyes, every day that she was playing and having like good time. But because she know that it's not safe to stay, it's very danger, and I came here. So luckily, I just came in US, and in 2016, when
You're muted now. Nor you're muted.
hard,
We lost your audio.
I was going through a very difficult time, but slowly I adjusted with my family, and I was welcome. I can tell you, it's not just because I'm here. I was welcome in the environment, and in Pittsburgh, so many people came and helped me, and they gave me a sense that I feel home in Pittsburgh. If I did not feel like that kind of welcoming, God knows what kind of things I had to go through to adjust, whether to stay, whether go back, and it was very confusing. But fortunately, I was welcome. And now I can understand when I watch the movie, people who left their country and took that journey in the boat, and finally to in a hope they heard in Europe. They are nicer people, they are kind people, they were welcomed in. And they will say, okay, we came, we just escaped from war, and now we are looking for shelter. I saw in the film that is very heartbroken. They made a wall and they say, go back, push them back to the sea, push them back to the deadly sea, that you have no place here. and they destroyed their tent, that they had to sleep underneath, and destroy it, and the tractor, they throwing everywhere, and that's situation is very heartbroken to me, and I can understand, and they're looking for shelter, they're looking to survive, and I wish that one day all countries that in war to be a peaceful situation, that refugee can go back and continue their normal life.
Leslie, the experience of refugees coming to United States is very different from Europe. Can you talk about that?
So they're, just so we're apples to apples, or it's a little different. These are people pouring into the country, into Europe. They weren't vetted. They were not given refugee status before they got there and prepared. The people that I work with have gone through the vetting through the United States, and many, many years of vetting, security vetting, medical screenings, criminal background checks. Those are the people. So it's different. So the ones we're resettling are already gone through security. And there's very, very few that have come in the last 4 years with the last administration. However, so as our work, what we do is we know they're coming. We find an apartment for them, which is not easy, but we welcome them at the airport. We take them to all the services and with interpretation and set them up in the US. Noor is now an employment specialist, and they go to him and they get their first job, which is very low level, no matter what usually. But they're on a trajectory as resettled refugees where, yes, it's really difficult the first few years, but you do see success later on as people get the language. They are refugees coming through the US refugee program are 100% legal. They can access anything. So if you compare who's pouring into our border at the south, of our country, then you might see something more like Europe. They're just coming in, or not in our case. So that's with the asylum seeker. And, we've kept out those people. But in terms of an actual refugee by the definition, legal definition, the ones we help, and I have felt we've saved lives through this program. It used to be the best program around the world, and I hope it can be rebuilt now because it was basically crushed in the last 4 years. But we are hopeful that under the new administration, we're going to see. And again, even if we take 125,000, which is what Biden is suggesting, there are 25 million refugees. So resettlement isn't the answer. It can't be the answer. I'm not an expert. Maybe Lou is more an expert on the other solutions. It can't just be, this process. We have to solve problems where people live. So I hope that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Let's open it up to the rest of you here in the meeting. Your impressions of the film, maybe questions for Lou or Noor or Lou or Leslie. It's a quiet group.
I know that one of our staff is on the call, Kaylee, who meets them at the airport, who sets up the homes, who sees them. the director of the program, if she wants to say anything.
I guess I'd be interested, Will, if I could, to give you my reactions to the interview and to the film, of course,
right,
coming together. Two things come out of the interview, and really are in the film as well. One is you have to start with the definition that these people are human beings. That's where we started with him this morning. And of course, that is what marginalization does. Refugees are very marginalized people. The end process is to completely hide them from the rest of the world, keep them hidden, and of course, worse. That happens, of course, in the South. It's what's going on right now. It certainly goes on within Europe, a continent which has experienced this before in a very big way, not that long ago. The second thing that comes out of this, of course, is the issue of Europe and its view of the rest of the world compared to what I sometimes call the settler countries, that is the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, where through history, Europeans went out and took other large chunks of land that they didn't originally come from. So the US, and I think the other countries I mentioned as well, do have procedures for separating out those who are good, acceptable refugees and go through the process legally and become legal immigrants. And you mentioned 125,000 is now being proposed out of 25 million. Europe doesn't see any role for immigration in its future. The UK has, despite everything, the large number, I don't think ever has defined a refugee contribution from a political, economic, or a legal perspective, because they are root nations. They have historical definitions of themselves that are different from settler societies like the United States, where we brought our national values, not entirely, but to some extent, to a large extent with us, and they blended in together to create multinational, but increasingly homogenous societies in terms of language, culture, values. Again, not 100%, not everybody, and not yet fully developed, but there's at least a logic of that that's built into our system as an immigrant society that you can't find, I think, outside of these immigrant societies that had their origins in Europe. So I think it's that humanness, the absence of it, the marginalization process that we have to keep in mind in order to do what it was done to people during World War II, in order to accept what's done to illegal refugees in Europe now, or in this country. You have to dehumanize these people. That's the only way that our conscience, our thinking process will allow us to have this happen. So I think that came out of the film very clearly. And of course, I think he reiterated that in his interview this morning. Thanks.
I can see that we have Fernanda has her hand raised. She has a question or a comment.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thinking about your comments and what I have heard here, and picking people with our security background checks is like picking drops from a wave that is coming into you of people. So, and again, as Professor Picard says, to humanize these refugees, wouldn't it be worthy to have teach them languages, which is going to be key for their integration into new communities, into new societies, all that people that we saw in the film that is doing nothing, the children are not going to school. Can we start at least by teaching languages there, trying to set something for the future, because our processes, our systems are not really adapting. They are not really matching the challenge, the magnitude of the challenge. Can we start by something simple like that? Thank you.
Well, I can talk about those that come to the US. First of all, they may spend 20 years in a refugee camp, and a refugee camp was never meant to be a permanent home. tend to be temporary, but I think the average stay now in a refugee camp is something like 17 years. But they're struggling for their lives there, and then you're not thinking about where you're going to go, and you don't even know where you're going to go. So many refugees that come to the US, actually they're not being picked for high skills or English. The US program has been life-saving. A lot of single moms or women and children and people, just in need. But they are all connected to English language upon arrival, at least I think everywhere, but I can speak to Pittsburgh. Once they start the jobs they get, it gets really difficult to keep the language up. Now, the virtual has changed that a little, but to get to English class, when you have an hour and a half commute each way, you're on your feet all day, you've got children at home, and it's really, really hard. So I know that English language acquisition is very challenging when you struggle in all the ways, your trauma, your job, your family, and trying to make it every day. But English is the key. We have different programs that we try to implement. We have volunteer partners. Now again, Duolingo, people are using more. And our partner is Literacy Pittsburgh, and that, again, virtual is going to make it easy. But we talk about how important English is. And again, you have to have a roof over your head and stability to be thinking clearly enough to really educate yourself. And it comes slowly. The kids are going to get it in school. The kids become fluent the younger they are, very, very fast. Also want to say that you can't get your citizenship without English, not almost all cases. So there's big incentive on that side. Refugees are eligible at 5 years, but if they don't have the language, they won't be able to pass the test. So it's another way in which the US is watching refugees closely upon arrival and until they're citizens. But English is key, absolutely.
And we have some questions in the chat. Sean asked, I don't know if anyone of the panel knows this, or if Will knows this, if did they track anyone who was in the film later? Do you know that?
I don't know the follow up on the film.
And Ed asked, is there a significant difference in how European countries treat refugees? I know that's been said a lot about that team too.
Is the question, is there a difference between different European countries?
In how European countries, I think it's related to the US and how Europe treats refugees, but maybe Ed can.
Within Europe, there are significant differences in how refugees are treated. I know we heard criticism of Germany and the Scandinavian countries, but they're on one edge of the European option, particularly in Central and Southern and Eastern Europe. The refugees tend to be treated much harsher. They tend to be isolated more quickly, and in fact, the resistance to immigration in Hungary, which is a country that very few of the refugees wanted to actually stay in. It was a transit country to get them to either the UK or Germany or the Scandinavian countries. So yeah, you can see within the context differences, but I think what they have are refugee programs. The US has an immigration program. Yes, it didn't last long once in the last 4 years, but presumably it will come back. And the principles of the refugee are part of a bigger program, because this country had about 10 million indigenous people when we started our invasion, and of course we have had policies for immigration for 250 years, and we keep changing it, and we deprioritize it. We, in the 20s, tried to keep people out. We're now in the 100 years later, the 20s, we tried again to keep people out. And it doesn't happen. But we do have the principle in law of legal immigration, which is different than having a refugee policy.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I just put in the chat that he meant between different countries in Europe, if there are, different ways that the refugees are treated among European countries.
And Lou, I had a question that maybe you could address. Europe after World War II was a continent full of refugees and tremendous migrations, either forced or by necessity.
Yeah.
I wonder if that experience shaped how they're dealing with refugees now.
Actually, yeah, 2 to 3 million people after the war were displaced in Europe. My sense of that is that the Europeans want to forget that. That was a time ago, and they've redefined the boundaries, and they don't equate that with what's going on now. I think it's an important question why their memories should be so short, since many of their grandparents or great-grandparents were war refugees in 1945. People moved a lot, boundaries moved a lot. So, but it's a good question. The rise of nationalism is a part of this process, and that, of course, has not only hit Europe but also this country. But I think the physical distinction and differences perhaps have made this group of refugees different. It certainly has had an impact on this country. The fact that they're not coming from Ireland anymore, or coming from Serbia or Eastern Europe. Pittsburgh is a good reflection of that. I mean, this was very much a city built by immigration, as most big American cities are. But we're talking now about people who come from a different part of the world than where this country's immigration usually came from in the past. And this, I think, has made a big difference in Europe as well.
Nora has her hand raised. She has a
Yes.
question or comment.
Yes, I do. A comment. I was just going to say that I must have in my mind somehow that refugees are less than human, because when I watched this, it was like, oh my God, these people are like me. These people are like me, only they have no home. And it was just horrifying to me that they had no place to go. And they could not go back to that war environment. I think that I hope more people get to see this, because it's very, very eye-opening. And that's all. I don't really have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elnora.
Yeah, I do actually have a question for the panel, I think, but more Leslie and Noor. But especially with the pandemic now, I'm interested in knowing how this process is going for you and for the refugees at the Refugee and Immigrant Services. How is that going?
Well, it depends on how long you've been here, but last March, we had just resettled 7 families. And then we had all the families from the year before, they were still very new. And our team just pivoted to make sure the food needs were met, urgent medical needs were met, that they had education on COVID. There were no rivals for a while. From March, then we got some people in August and September. And then we just got 2 families, one in January, one in February. And so they're given education, go overseas, their temperature's taken, I don't know how many different times. At this point, they don't have vaccines, but that could change. They isolate for 2 weeks. We do a lot of porch visits. We use as much distancing and mask wearing as possible. It's Nora's out in the field. He can speak to how he's getting people jobs still. if you want, in the safest way we can. But people have to work and get on the bus. You want to speak to that?
Yes, sure. Yeah, this pandemic situation really changed the life of everyone and mostly impacted very on refugees people because they lost their job and they were the first line of people that they were laid off. And after that, now when the situation getting is better and better, they asking for a job. So that's kind of difficult because some of them, they don't have driving license. They have to use buses to use 2 buses to get to work. And that's also when we take them to job interview, that's also is a kind of challenge because we need to Uber them to the company, and also I have to meet them in an employer and then keep the social distance and mask and then do all the paperwork and HR stuff. And then they continue working. And honestly, sometimes that is they were not at that full-time position. Their job was kind of back and forth. And so they're willing to work. They are very hard-working people. And despite that, there is a pandemic money available, but they are ready to work rather than to stay home and collect this free money. So that's the beauty of this. The refugee, they want to work and make a difference in society.
Yeah, thank you. Glenn asked if refugees can legally get driver's license.
Refugee is 100% illegal upon when they set foot in their first airport they get to. As long as they stay law-abiding, they're on the path to citizenship. And we're talking again about refugees, not people with different immigration statuses. We help them get their social security card. They use the safety net programs until their earnings are higher. Yeah, they drive. They have to have the language. They have to pass the test. Usually you see, actually by the first year, a lot of people have cars. Wow.
Thank you.
Just to add one things on that, when I came here, my biggest goal was to get my driving license. The first time I failed, and the second time I was really worried and stressful whether or not I pass. So that was my biggest goal. When I get it, I just breathe, and that my life got much, much easier. So driving license and a car, that's make refugee lives much, much better and make them they can stay on their feet.
Noor, what was your profession when you were in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I studied law in Afghanistan. I was attorney, and I worked for non-profit organization as a human rights activist, and then I worked for U.S. government as a legal assistant in the U.S. Embassy for almost 5 years. So yeah, whatever I studied, and they took me so many years to build my career. When I came here, they all multiplied by 0. So I couldn't pursue my legal education, and it was very expensive if I go to continue my higher education. And that was one of the most stressful to me, and it's very disappointing that I came here in a country that I came for a hope to go higher and continue my education. But when I came here, mostly I saw the doors closed to me. I went to University of Pittsburgh. When I saw, told me it cost me more than $40,000, $35,000 if I go and study. And I couldn't get a scholarship, and I couldn't job in the legal field because they did not accept my credential. So I see the doors are closed to me then, because I had family, kids, and I decided to forget all my past and my background and do whatever I can to survive.
We have some questions in the chat. Licia asked, are recent immigrants eligible for stimulus checks?
Yes. If they, well, Kaylee's on the line. She knows all the little ins and outs, but they
I
pay
can
taxes.
say it
want
if you
to give
want.
the- because you,
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time trying to figure this out with some tax experts last April when we had people getting laid off. Basically, anyone who for tax purposes counts as a resident alien, which is different than a refugee or permanent resident, but pretty much anyone who already had their green card or who had been there for at least 6 months of the past year was eligible for it. For people who hadn't met those requirements, they would be eligible when they filed their next year taxes to claim that, since they would be a resident in the following year. So for some of our families we were working with, yes. For some of them, no.
but there was definitely an outpouring of generosity from the worlds we work in. So nobody went homeless or anything. I mean, it's the flip side of these things. People did step up for our newest families.
Thank you. Sue put in the chat, what would you say to the people who say we should take care of our own first? I hear this all the time from supporters of 45. These are the same people who are against any social programs for Americans as well.
Well, I would like to know where they're from originally and if they're native to this country. And I usually, most of us are all from somewhere and got our chance in this country. We're also the US program, even if it gets to 125,000, it's always been under 1%. It's really not a lot. They look at data that shows what we give the refugee versus what they've given us in terms of taxes, and so many go on to start businesses and achieve later on. It's just, it's really an American thing to do, to be welcoming. That's
But it's also the, as you say, it's the economic thing to do. Countries that take immigrants in are developing faster, better using talent and have more talent available than countries that lose immigrants. When you leave a place, you leave the place poorer, not just financially, but in terms of skills, in terms of the ability to work and contribute to society. It's a dead loss. The immigrant countries are the big countries, settler countries are all immigrant countries. And of course, you know, in this country, about 4 million people are entitled to perhaps ask that question if you take them back to the year 1600. The rest of us all came from someplace else.
And the entrepreneurial spirit lives really hard in a refugee or immigrant. They've already risked so much. They didn't do it. That you ask a family why they came, they say, for my kids, for future, for hope. That's the people we want here.
Thank you. Fernanda has her hand raised.
Sorry about commenting a second time, but you were saying, Leslie, that you are hosting also single moms, refugees. How many women are, you know, relative to men, are coming to the US as refugees? Because my experience in a program that I tried to get in Mexico to accept Syrian students, I wanted to host students at my home, but I asked for women, and the reasons they gave me was that there were not many women traveling as refugees because their parents, as they are women and in their cultures, they do not like them to travel abroad alone. So I don't know if you have encountered that same problem, or how is the proportion between men and women refugees? Thank you.
Those that are chosen for the U.S. program, many are single moms. So these are often people who fled en masse from their country due to, I mean, horrific genocide, where sexual violence was the weapon. And they flee to neighboring countries, and they're in refugee camps, you know, which are horrible in themselves. And so they are rescued, you know, at least that's how it was. So you do see single moms coming in larger proportion, and there's some special programs for them, but they have to work, you know, they have to find ways to watch their kids. And most, yeah, so definitely Pittsburgh could be different than other cities. Every city's a little different. I mean, we definitely have our share of maybe 20, 30%, something like that. Maybe 20% single moms. Sometimes they have a child who's over, you know, an age where they can work too. But older people, yeah, there's definitely women and kids coming alone. And kids coming alone too. We don't take that. Special agencies take the unaccompanied minors kids.
Is there anyone else who has something to say, have a comment or a question? This might be a good time to wrap. I had a last comment about the film. I really appreciate that Ai Weiwei took on this topic. I think knowing that it's a problem without an obvious solution. Even resettlement programs, like Leslie said, it's, you know, they are a drop in the bucket as far as the pressure of the quantity of people who are, you know, leaving there, can't stay in their own countries. He, you know, he shows people just basically languishing in camps, wanting to ultimately return to their home, but of course their home is not often a safe place in itself. So there's not a real, you know, there's not a solution. And I think sometimes filmmakers are asked to be, you know, present solutions along with problems, which essentially means, you know, give some hope or a happy ending. And I don't think that he chose, you know, felt the obligation, nor do I, to do that. And so he's, you know, he compelled people to look at the situation, to not look at it politically, where we could, you know, say, well, you know, a country like Germany says, well, we've done what we can, kind of thing. Well, if you look at the reality, it's not really, it's not a real solution. And so I really appreciate that he made this film.
Yeah. So we can wrap up if anyone else has any more comments or questions. I want to thank everyone. You had something, Will? Sorry.
I wanted to mention that I run this group called the Documentary Salon, and some of the people here in the room are part of that. If you're interested, either in being in the mailing list or being a member, you can either just Google Pittsburgh Documentary Salon or contact the people at the festival, and I'll put you on the list. Thanks.
Yeah.
Plug for us. I mean, if these numbers, they're expected to go skyrocketing, we will be building out more our volunteer program. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. We do work with volunteers in different ways. And now with virtual, you can do it from the comfort of your home.
Thank you. So thank you everyone, all the speakers for joining us, Leslie, Louise, Well, for joining us. And I want to thank you everyone from the audience for being here. And we also want to thank Dietrich College Computing Services. And we want to thank our sponsors for this event. So the School of Art at CMU, the Documentary Salon, thanks Will, the Refugee and Immigrant Services, the City of Asylum, the Humanities Scholars Program, and CMU's Graduate Student Assembly. Also, we want to ask you to please be on the lookout for a survey regarding tonight's event and regarding the film in the coming days. Your response will help us make improvements for future films in our virtual format. And the rest, the film will be available until tomorrow for you to watch. So if you haven't watched, you can still do so. Or if you have watched and you want to rewatch it, you have the chance. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next event. Thank you.
Thanks.